It all started with a chubby, smiling garden gnome named Barnaby. My wife, Sarah, had picked him up at a flea market because, in her words, he looks like he knows the secret to a good nap. Barnaby was placed proudly next to our petunia bed, a cheerful, harmless little guy. Our neighborhood, Whispering Pines Estates, was nice enough. Tidy lawns, quiet streets. But it came with a built-in overlord, the Homeowners Association, presided over by Brenda Schlachter. If you're picturing a woman with a severe blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and a perpetual expression of smelling something foul, you're on the right track. She was the platonic ideal of a Karen. 3 days after Barnaby took up residence, the first letter arrived. It wasn't an email. Brenda operated via certified, cream-colored parchment, as if she were drafting royal decrees. Official notice of violation, Whispering Pines Estates HOA, to the residents of 1428 Serene Vista Lane. From the Board of Directors, Brenda Schlachter, President. Subject, prohibited exterior ornamentation, Code 12, Section 4, Paragraph B. It has come to the board's attention that an unapproved, non-conforming garden gnome has been erected on your property. All exterior ornamentation must be submitted to the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, for pre-approval. This item is in violation of the community's aesthetic standards, which prioritize a uniform and sophisticated landscape. You have 48 hours to remove the violation. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50 per day until the situation is remedied. Sarah read it over my shoulder. Erected? She said, raising an eyebrow. She makes Barnaby sound like a public nuisance. What's next? A cease and desist for the dandelions. We laughed it off. I mean, a gnome? Come on. I emailed the ARC, attaching a picture of Barnaby with the subject line, formal submission for gnome approval. I got an auto-reply saying requests could take 4 to 6 weeks for review. The next day, the fine arrived. $50. For a gnome. That's when the petty switch in my brain flipped from off to on. I wasn't going to pay a fine for a ceramic nap enthusiast. I'm a software engineer. My entire job is finding bugs and exploiting logical flaws in systems. Brenda Schlachter had just become my new system. I dug out the massive HOA bylaws document, a thrilling 120-page tome of misery. I spent my evenings poring over it like it was the Da Vinci Code. Code 12, Section 4, Paragraph B was real. It was absurd, but it was real. It stated that any lawn statuary required ARC approval. But as I read, I started noticing inconsistencies. The rules were insane. Mailboxes had to be a brushed nickel finish, devoid of any cartoonish or whimsical elements. Holiday lights could only be white and could not be illuminated past 8:03 p.m. Not 8 o'clock, not 8:05, 8:03. I imagined Brenda standing on her porch with a stopwatch. And then I found the golden ticket, buried in a section about maintenance of common areas. It stated that all fences, including those enclosing individual backyards, are considered common property and must be maintained in a uniform color, Whispering Pines slate, a specific Sherwin-Williams code. I grabbed my phone and took a walk. Brenda's house was a monument to beige conformity. But as I approached, my heart did a little flutter. Her backyard fence, a 6-foot wooden privacy fence, was not Whispering Pines slate. It was a bold, freshly stained dark mahogany. Click. Photo evidence. I kept walking. Old Man Henderson's mailbox was a rustic, copper-top thing that was definitely not brushed nickel. But Brenda loved Mr. Henderson. He was on the board. Click. The Millers down the street had a pink flamingo from a birthday party still staked in their lawn. Click. But the piece de resistance came from pure luck. I was chatting with our next-door neighbor, Chloe, who was fuming because Brenda had fined her for her grass being an unacceptably yellow shade of green during a summer drought. She's a nightmare, Chloe whispered. But get this. Last Tuesday, I saw a massive delivery truck at her house. They dropped off a huge prefab garden shed, right in her backyard. I don't remember any ARC notices about that. My eyes widened. The bylaws were clear. Any new external structure, including but not limited to sheds, gazebos, or pergolas, must have full ARC approval before installation. I thanked Chloe, my mind racing. That shed was the key. The fines for Barnaby were piling up. We'd refused to pay, and our polite letters pointing out the selective enforcement were met with increasingly hostile threats. The final straw was a letter threatening a lien on our house. Then, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, I was in my office when I heard a key fumbling at our front door. I thought it was Sarah, forgetting her keys, but then I heard a frustrated jiggling, followed by a muttered, "It's supposed to work." I opened the door to find Brenda Schlachter, red-faced, holding a master key. She jumped back. "Brenda, can I help you?" She composed herself, her face settling into its usual mask of pinched authority. "I am here for a compliance inspection. The master key is for emergency HOA business." "Inspecting the inside of my home for a garden gnome violation?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "The violation is external, but the offending item is personal property. I need to confirm its removal." She tried to peer past me. "You are not entering my home without a warrant or my permission, both of which you lack. Get off my porch." Her face purpled. "This is not over," she spat, before stomping back to her pristine SUV. I called Sarah immediately. "You are not going to believe this." I told her everything. Sarah, my wonderful, brilliant wife, was silent for a moment. Then she said something that would change everything. "Don't worry about it. If she comes back, let me know. I've got this." An hour later, I saw Brenda's SUV pull up again. This time, a police cruiser was right behind it. My stomach dropped. She actually called the cops. I watched from the window as Brenda, gesticulating wildly, pointed at our house and our, now hidden, gnome. The two officers, looking bored, listened patiently. Then they walked up to our door. I met them there. "Afternoon, sir," the first officer said. "This lady says she's the HOA president and has a right to inspect your property for a violation. She says you were belligerent." Before I could speak, my phone, which was in my hand, rang. It was Sarah. I put it on speaker. "Honey," Sarah's voice came through, calm and clear. "Is that Brenda with the police?" "Yeah, it is." "Perfect." Put the officer on the phone. The officer, looking confused, took the phone. "Ma'am." "Officer, this is Sarah Wilson, homeowner at 1428 Serene Vista. My husband is a reasonable man. The person you are with, Brenda Schlachter, attempted to illegally enter our home earlier today with a master key she claims is for HOA business. There is no provision in our bylaws for that. She is harassing us over a garden ornament. Furthermore, please inform her that if she does not cease and desist immediately, she will be hearing from my lawyer." The officer's eyebrows shot up. "And who is your lawyer, ma'am?" Sarah's voice was sweet as pie. "My father, Robert Henderson. You might know him as the senior partner at Henderson, Gray, and Shaw, the real estate law firm that drafted the original covenants for Whispering Pines Estates 30 years ago." The silence was deafening. Brenda's face went from triumphant to ashen in half a second. Old Man Henderson, her favorite board member, was Sarah's dad. She had never taken my last name. Brenda never made the connection. "He's particularly interested," Sarah continued, "in why the HOA president is violating at least 3 major bylaws herself, including the installation of an unapproved shed. We have photos." The officer handed me back the phone, trying to hide a smile. He turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, I think you need to take this up at your next HOA meeting. This is a civil matter. We can't help you." They left Brenda standing alone on our sidewalk, utterly defeated. A special HOA meeting was called the following week. The community room was packed. It was a full-on rebellion. Chloe was there. The Millers were there. Dozens of others who had been victimized by Brenda's petty regime. Brenda tried to start the meeting with her usual iron-fisted agenda. "The first order of business is the repeated violations at 1428 Serene Vista." I stood up. "Actually, Brenda, I'd like to introduce new business." I walked to the front and plugged a thumb drive into the projector. What followed was a PowerPoint presentation I titled, Selective Enforcement, a Study in Hypocrisy. I showed the photo of her dark mahogany fence next to the bylaw about Whispering Pines slate. I showed the unapproved shed in her backyard. I showed the non-conforming mailboxes of her friends that had never received a fine. The room erupted in angry murmurs. But that's not all, I said, clicking to the next slide. It was a screenshot of the HOA financials which I'd legally requested. I noticed that the company that installed your shed, A1 Sheds, was paid $4,000 from the HOA's Common Area Maintenance Fund last year for a shed that is on your private property. The room went silent. That wasn't just hypocrisy. That was corruption. Brenda sputtered. That was for storage of HOA equipment. Funny, I said. The bylaws state that HOA equipment must be stored in the community clubhouse storage closet, which has been empty for years. It was over. The crowd was on its feet. A vote of no confidence was called for immediately. It was unanimous. Brenda Schlachter was removed as HOA president that night. She and her husband moved out a few months later, probably to find a neighborhood where they could be the tyrants. The new board, which I unfortunately got roped into joining, spent its first meeting repealing the dumbest rules. The gnome ban was the first to go. Barnaby now sits proudly on our porch, joined by two of his friends and a pink flamingo from the Millers. The Whispering Pines slate fence rule was amended to allow a variety of colors. The neighborhood actually looks more interesting now. Oh, and that master key? It was a copy sheet had made without board approval. We changed the clubhouse locks. The best part? Sarah's dad, Robert, had a good laugh about the whole thing. He wasn't really going to sue. Sarah just knew the mere mention of his name would send Brenda into a tailspin. It was a brilliant bluff. Sometimes, when I'm mowing my lawn, which is now a perfectly acceptable, if slightly dandelion-speckled, shade of green, I look over at Brenda's old house. The new family has a bunch of kids, and their yard is full of colorful toys. It's a beautiful sight. Justice, it turns out, doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, it wears a pointy red hat and a knowing smile.